Lance started towards home, and the spaniel limped after him. When the greyhound jumped over the gate, the puppy crawled under it. Sir Lancelot lived on a big farm, or ranch, in Colorado. He was about 8 months old, and Mr. Crawford, who owned the ranch, had bought him when he was a tiny puppy. Mr. Crawford wanted a dog to chase away the coyotes, or small wolves, which sometimes came near the ranch. But Lancelot was young and gentle, and he would not chase anything but rabbits. So Mr. Crawford did not pay much attention to the beautiful young dog, and Lance was often lonely. Mr. Crawford saw Lance and the spaniel coming towards the barn. He picked up the spaniel and stroked his shining coat. "Where did you come from?" "You little scamp," he said. Then he added, "I think Scamp is a good name for you." When Mr. Crawford carried Scamp to the house, Lance followed, proudly wagging his tail. Mrs. Crawford came to the door, and she was delighted with the little dog. When she saw his injured paw, she took him in the house to fix it. For a while, Lance sat by the door, waiting for his new friend to come out. Then Mrs. Crawford came out of the stable. Wait a minute. Then Mr. Crawford came out of the stable on a horse, and Lance followed him as he rode across the fields towards the mountains. The Crawford Ranch was in a beautiful valley surrounded by mountains. There was a small herd of cows on the ranch and a flock of sheep. A big collie dog named Bob helped to take care of these animals. For several days after he found the spaniel puppy, Lance looked for his new friend. But Scamp's paw was still sore, and Mrs. Crawford would not let him out of the house. Then one sunny morning, Lance found Scamp playing by the kitchen door. He was so glad to see the little dog that he ran wildly around the yard, leaping back and forth over a wheelbarrow each time he went around. At first, Scamp was startled by Lance's wild play, but soon he ran after him. His long ears flapped, and his short legs went as fast as he could make them go. But he couldn't get near the greyhound. At last he sat down and howled, and Lance ran to him and licked his nose. The cocker puppy and Lance were happy when they were together. Lance would lie down on the ground and let Scamp bite his ears and his tail, and he always played gently with the small dog. One day, when Scamp had been living at the ranch for about a month, the two dogs ran away. They ran across the fields and up a hill to some woods. Scamp's keen nose found the trails of squirrels. Greyhounds do not hunt with their noses. They have very good eyesight and can see a long distance, but their sense of smell is poor. Little Scamp couldn't see the squirrels high up in the tree, but Lance could, so he began to bark too. The dogs had lots of fun, and it was almost dark when they started for home. When Mrs. Crawford saw them come in the yard, she was glad to see Scamp, for she thought he was lost. But she scolded Lance because he had led the puppy away. Lance slept in a warm corner of the horse stable. He was fond of the horses, and whenever anyone went for a ride, he went with them. He would race ahead, chasing all the rabbits he could find. But if he saw a coyote in the distance, he always came back and ran beside the horse. Mr. Crawford thought that Lance was old enough to chase coyotes, and he was disappointed when the big puppy acted as if he was afraid of them. He were afraid of them. The greyhound tried to do everything that Scamp did, and he was unhappy when the Crawfords would not allow him to go in the house with his little friend. Scamp was a mischievous little dog, and sometimes Mrs. Crawford had to punish him. One day he was left alone in the house. There was no one to play with, so he took a pillow off the sofa and began to shake it. When Mrs. Crawford came home, she found pieces of the pillow scattered all over the living room. Scamp rushed out of the door when Mrs. Crawford came in, so she went out to look for him. Soon she found him playing with Lance by the stable door. When Scamp saw Mrs. Crawford, he hid behind Lance because he was afraid she would punish him. But his bright eyes and long black ears looked so friendly peeking out from under the greyhound that she only laughed. Sometimes Lance teased Scamp by running around in circles. He ran so fast the short-legged spaniel would get dizzy trying to follow him. Then one hot afternoon, Scamp found a way to tease Lance. Lance was watching Scamp as he sniffed around some bushes. The little spaniel's tail began to wag faster and faster, and Lance grew more and more excited. He knew from the way Scamp's tail wagged there was a rabbit in the bushes.